Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to AVA Gallery's ArtReach. Before the program gets started, as always, I'd like to thank the Mount Rushmore Foundation and the Massachusetts Bank Foundation for generously funding ArtReach each week so it can be free for everybody to enjoy. Please feel free to take part in this conversation by asking questions. You can do this by unmuting yourself or by using the chat. Today, I am very happy to be in the studio with Ryan Kelley. He is a sculptor who works with wire to create some really engaging results that replicate trees and root systems. And he's going to be talking a bit about his process. So without further ado, I'll throw it over to Ryan. And as always, feel free to ask questions as he demonstrates his process and talks a little bit about his work. All right, all you,
Awesome.
Ryan.
Thanks so much. This is such an honor to be here. Thank you, Mike. Um, Welcome everybody. My name is Ryan Kelley. I'm a 30-year-old self-taught award-winning local wire sculptor from Byfield, Massachusetts. I started creating art because I was bad at everything else in high school, my senior year. And in the last 12 years, I've created over 600 pieces. Um, I've taught over 6,700 people of all ages. And I found a passion and a career, and art really changed my life. So I'm super honored to be here. Hopefully, people that are watching can learn something new, or maybe get some inspiration for just trying something and really going with something that you love. So currently, I'm in my home studio, which is in my parents' basement, which is always fun. I am in the process of building a larger studio, which Mike and I will probably talk about later. But I'm currently working on a project involving a lot of wire leaves. This is a commission for a client to create a banyan tree, as well as there's another project which is just behind this one, which is a collaboration with an artist named Kyle Agua from um, California and Colorado. He's actually a sculptor as well as a pilot. And him and I are working on a commissioned piece of a stainless steel skull, kind of like a brain, and then there'll be a tree growing out of it.
That is
That's it.
fantastic.
Anybody have any questions to start us off?
Well, I was curious, Ryan, how did you you said you were a self-taught artist, and wire sculpture I feel like is a pretty like niche craft. I don't know many, maybe you know a lot of artists working with wire, but
Sure.
how did you discover working with wire?
Sure. So I've always been kind of hands-on. My dad is was a carpenter and a contractor, and my mom has always been, an amazing chef and puzzles and games. And as we were kids with my brother and I, um, so I played mallet percussion. I built stuff. Like I was always using my hands, but I for some reason just really gravitated towards the wire. I had a study period my senior year, and I was not doing my English makeup homework. Sorry, Miss Dempsey. And I was just kind of messing around in the art room, and the teacher, Robin Verrett, was like, "Hey, if you're going to be in here, you got to do something art related." So I it was messing with the wire. It always, again, Legos, connects, toys, games like that. So um, I kind of latched on to the wire because I love that it's malleable. I love that it's pretty, not intense as far as it's not really going to break, or you can pause and begin again. It's not like glass or ceramic where, um, you know, there's a finite amount of fragility or pressure or temperature or things like that. So the wire just really kind of started and never stops. The only thing that's changed is the thickness and the size of the wire, and then the size of the pieces that I make. Ooh, Leah, that's a good question. So, and Mike, if you want to be the questionnaire person for anybody with
No, if you see it in
captions
the
or not,
chat, you're welcome to
sure,
respond to it directly. Leah asks, what is the name of the tool that Ryan is using to wrap the wire around now?
sure, yeah, I'll give a perfect introduction to kind of what's going on here. So right now, I'm taking some wire that I cut off a big spool. I actually order wire a mile at a time from a local New Hampshire company, Wesbo Electronics. In my career so far, I've used almost 70 miles of wire, which is kind of a lot of wire. So I'm taking that wire that I twisted a couple times here and here, and I am turning the long ends of the wire here into these coils, and these coils will then be turned into leaves of the branches and things like that. The name of the wire company is Wesbell Electronics, and they're on my website. Um, so the tool that I'm wrapping around is actually not really a tool. It is a pair of vice grips and a piece of brass rod. It is a homemade tool, as most artists have, and it's 1/8 inch brass rod that I kind of smooth at the top. And this allows me to kind of slide and twist the wire to create these tight coils. And then again, as I finish all of the wires to create the coils, I'll then go back and make the coils into the leaves.
And for those of you that tuned in a little late, this is kind of what he's
Yeah,
moving towards.
exactly. Yeah, that's a good question. The um the cool thing about this particular project, and the one behind me, this banyan tree here, um, this is technically the most amount of leaves. There we go. This project here. This is the most amount of wire leaves that I've ever created on a piece. I think it's just under 40,000 little loops on that one piece right now. And the reason why I know that is when you make 40,000 of something, you know. So I wrap the wire around the brass rod. And that's kind of my little trick. When I teach students, which I actually have a class up in New Hampshire on Valentine's Day next week at the Gathering Place Studio. I think there's 8 spots left right now. Um, when I teach students, the wire leaves is kind of like, a little bit more advanced than maybe just a standard little wire tree that maybe looks like a dead tree or a tree that hasn't bloomed yet. Um, People wrap around pencils or pens or crochet needles or paintbrushes or anything. And I have kind of make a joke that, I've taught thousands of people and I've seen thousands of ways, especially kids. They come up with ways to just kind of mess it all together. And depending on the shape of the object, that gets different shaped leaves. I've seen triangles, I've seen hexagons because of the pencils or anything like that. So the trick with me as far as sculpting the quote unquote leaves is all you're doing is adding density. It's kind of a joke I make where I don't artists and sculptors don't really have the opportunity to be, impressionistic that often. All of our painter friends can, give a brush stroke, or they'll do a little line and you're like, oh my gosh, that's like an igloo in the mountain on the side of a hill. And us sculptors, we actually have to, make the thing. So my joke is that I'm not really making wire leaves, I'm just creating density. So I'm taking this really long piece and taking it and only making it take up this much little space. And that kind of gives, when you get to the tree, like I said, it really changes kind of the perception of the density and that concentration of the amount of the thing. And this particular tree is going to have 300 wires. The name of the blunt-ended tool. So these are just pliers. They are not necessarily needle nose pliers because, as you said, they're kind of stub nosed. Sometimes they call them snub nosed or stub nose pliers. This is a really old pair. I've actually had this my entire career, these pair of pliers, which I like because now they're kind of less sharp, so they don't mar up the wire as much. But most of my tools, my number one tool is a needle nose pliers. That's what I have right there. Same exact pair that I've had, again for 10 years. But between just the hand tools, I really don't use um, I don't use a drill to do this. There are plenty of people on the internet that you can see use power tools and things, but I really feel like creating by hand. I get the best feel for it. I get the best result for it. Um, you know, it's why it's art. It's what created kind of this piece, and every single one is handmade.
And Ryan, I had a quick question for you because you do replicate like a pretty wide range of foliage.
Sure.
I'd like it, for example, a piece like this. Is it a similar process of looping, or is that a radically different process?
Yeah, good question. So that piece, which is actually the largest wire tree I've ever made, that was what my first book. I have two books currently, but that was what my first book was about, was just creating that piece. That piece is the ends of the wire, instead of being twisted and coiled like I'm doing, I actually hammered them. So the copper wire is soft, and I can actually hammer the wire to kind of create almost a little bit more texture, a little bit of like visual depth, but also it reflects the light very differently. So as compared to this thin kind of, again, cylindrical wire, by hammering, it sometimes gets 2 or 3 times as thick, and it really changed kind of the way that the light kind of catches it. And again, that kind of perception of the density and the material.
Okay.
The fun other fact about that giant tree is there's 2.25 miles of wire just in that one tree. Suzanne, I see you looking very intently. I'd love to answer any questions or hear something from you. I love to do this. The other thing I joke about with the kids when I do this is they call me a robot, which I guess I'll take as a compliment. And every one of those little loops around that wire is going to be one loop, aka one little leaf.
I just want to see the leaves. I'm tired of making the springs.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, let me finish up this one more thing and I will actually show you how I make some leaves. How about that?
Well, we could cut out those coils into a million little links and make a chain.
You could, yeah. And actually, that's to that point. If you've ever gotten, jewelry class, or especially this is 22 gauge copper wire. Um, Obviously, it's easier to make the chain with a little thicker, but you could, and that's how they make like a gold chain or a necklace or a bracelet, is they'll do these links and they'll cut down one side, and then they will actually form the links. And then depending on the type of jewelry, it'll either be soldered or put together. It's also how they make chainmail, which then they would actually kind of weave and connect them together in a special pattern. But I will show you the leaf off of this one right here. It's out of the way. So we take our ones we did earlier. And I always do one wire at a time. And now we don't need this. We just need these. We do. And this is my patented secret. Thank God nobody will ever see this. It's not like it's live on the internet anywhere. This is just for you and me. So I then flatten. See how I
Oh,
turn
it's great.
a little bit of a little technique, kind of twisting and closing at the same time. And then as you open this, I kind of go back a couple times because I really want this to be very planar. I want this to be, in line, and then go back and forth. And then every time I do that, it gets a little bit longer and a little bit more kind of individual circles. The joke I make is like, it looks like the top of a Hostess cupcake, but kids these days don't know what that is. And then I say it looks like a spiral bound notebook, but kids these days don't know what that is. So I even in my 30 years of life, I'm now becoming irrelevant to the young kids these days. So now I know how everybody else feels. But then we coil that clump together. I do a couple, personal patterns that I like the best, but by kind of rotating and pushing and squishing that all together, it creates the look of this clump of leaves, just like that.
Oh, that's great.
And then when you do that a bunch of times, it looks like a giant tree like that. But that's one. And like I said, this new piece with the brain that I'm working on with Kyle, this particular piece is going to have 300 wires. So I just did one. So I have 299 to go.
That's insane. You
What keeps you
count a
going?
lot.
I think it's there is something about like craft that we have an embroidery artist that's on this program quite frequently, and it's like it can be up to like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. What keeps you like entertained as you're doing kind of the menial part of art making, which I think for some people they can get lost there, like, or they feel that it's not worth the effort, or they don't keep pushing forward. So do you have any like mantras you tell yourself as you're doing the tedious part?
I have a cheeky answer and then I have like a real answer. The cheeky answer is every twist is like 3 cents. So I just like do it and do it and do it, and then I get paid at the end, which is kind of nice. But the other answer is, I try to balance, like I watch a lot of TV. I'm going to be honest. I watch a lot of TV. I love being informed and kind of inspired by different design shows or cooking shows or travel shows or a lot of garbage TV. I'm not going to lie. But watching TV in the background, every half an hour that goes by, every Netflix show, every whatever, it's like, oh, there was another half an hour. I just got paid to sit here and do this and watch a show. So it's kind of cool to do that. The other kind of factor in that is something that I look forward to, and we can kind of get into my future studio in a little bit too, is that, I've had, even just in this little, basement studio we're in right now, I can't tell you the amount of friends that have come and hung out and watercolored and painted and sculpted and, just talked, or we all watched a show or whatever. It can be art. Art doesn't have to be this like lone wolf thing, which is why I love doing the classes that I teach, because you see people creating together, even if it's all new to them. But I just really love being able to hang out and twist. I was just up at my girlfriend's house, with her and her parents a couple weekends ago, and I just brought this wire and was hanging out on the couch. She was doing her work, I was doing mine, but it's like, it's just a way to pass the time and do what I love, but also it is a job. And also it's just every little bit, it all matters. It's all part of the practice of just creating the piece that I'm getting paid to make.
That's great, Ryan.
Do you use the same gauge in all, or are we going to see maybe something else with a different gauge?
That is a good question. So this 22 gauge wire is pretty much always what I use. This is copper. I do have tinned copper, which is a silver color. I can't remember if one of the pictures, Mike, you chose, if it had the silver color. I know one chose the steel.
I can cue that up for sure.
I don't really use the steel wire anymore, but there's actually a project I just finished, which is actually on my Facebook and soon to be on my website, which is I actually just created a piece for the W Hotel in Boston through an art consultancy, Grand Image. And I used, 4 and 8 gauge wire. So it was almost as thick as your pinky.
Oh.
And very difficult to bend. I had to use massive tools. And we created some pretty large kind of leaves that were like a mixed media element. So there was a print of a leaf combined with my kind of rendition of a leaf, which was designed by Lindsay Hall, who's my girlfriend. And we kind of had this mixed media element, and that thicker wire is the first time I ever used the thicker wire. And let me tell you, I so much rather do this with my bare hands because it was very tough. The other
Yeah.
thing that I use, it's not necessarily a gauge, but when you get into steel rod, because I do weld some larger outdoor pieces, I use quarter inch round rod very often. I've done multiple pieces, outdoor welded tree sculptures with quarter inch rod. So that is even tougher than that copper. Yeah, look at this
Oh,
right on cue, dude. You've done this before. This is
yeah.
incredible.
Right.
He's a
Look at
pro.
that.
So that
Oh,
is about, I think that one was just under 5 feet tall, something like that. And that is all welded steel, and every single one of those marks on the trunk to get that texture is all weld. So I'm adding the metal and kind of combining those steel rods together to create a tree. It's a lot different structure and kind of process than how I'm doing the wire here, because this is a lot more twisting and combining, where the welding is obviously much more heavy duty and the material's harder. So it's less twisting and more kind of adding on the outside. But I do use different gauges. So that was a really good question. Did that answer a question, or do I need to get even fancier with my
oh, yes,
material
thank
for
you
you?
very much.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. I also use some copper sheet copper. I forget exactly what gauge thickness is. I think it's 16. But I create some metal roses, which I have a YouTube video on, and I create copper roses. But that's not wire at all. It's actually starting as copper sheet, and it gets cut out on a water jet. So a big jet of water cuts through the copper and creates these shapes. And then I will hand hammer and heat and hammer some more and patina the different colors. And that's actually not the wire at all. It's actually just the sheet copper that kind of gets sculpted and hammered, almost like a blacksmith kind of
Yeah.
to form that,
And you
which
have
is
a
fun.
picture of that?
I'm sure we could find one. I
Is that
actually
on
have
your
one right
website, Ryan?
behind. I have, yeah, the copper roses are on my website. Yeah.
So
Okay.
you wouldn't cut sheet copper with copper cutting tools? I mean, water? What?
Yeah. So I can cut sheet copper with what's called tin snips. And I have a couple pairs behind me that people are kind of familiar with that. People use them for HVAC or cutting screen or mesh or things like that. It's basically scissors for metal. But when I create the shapes for the copper roses, those are kind of a little more round. It's hard to cut circles with those. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. What a guy. So that is actually, thin copper that has been cut out into shapes, kind of like a 4-leaf clover, and a couple layers. And then they get cut out, they get ground, they get hammered, they get punched, they get hammered again. The top petals are heat treated with a big torch till they're red hot and quenched in water to create those different kind of orangey red colors. And then the sepal, which is the leaves underneath the stem, and then there's actually a leaf on the stem as well. All of that gets patinaed in a special vapor chamber that I made. And that becomes like a greenish blue color, kind of like the verdigris color, like the Statue of Liberty. And then they get assembled and clear coated. And I think I officially made like 7 dozen of them. And over the years, they've all sold, which I'm very grateful for. But it takes about a week to make 12. It's a lot of work. I spent a lot of money to get to a point where I can have the pieces that I need, and it's all hand hammered. Everything I do is, I was hammering this morning. My arm's still a little tired as I'm getting older. 25-year-old me was making them faster for sure. The cool thing that I like about my job now that, this is literally my job, which is incredible, is I really don't have 2 days that are the same, whether it's, even trees are all different. The clients are different. Teaching in different places, doing things like this is different. The other fun thing to do is that I get so many different opportunities, whether it's, welding a giant metal tree, or whether it's, creating leaves for a hotel, or whether it's, making wire tree, teaching wire art. There's so many different, opportunities, and it really isn't never boring. If anything, it's like too overwhelming, which is something I also work on. But I'm just super grateful of the fact that it's really never boring. It's never all the same. And that's up to me. You know, I do a lot of things. I have a couple different side jobs and things that keep me mostly out of trouble. So to be able to, um, have that diversity and be able to kind of schedule myself and be flexible and be spontaneous, I just find for my own personality and mental health and workflow that I like having a lot of stuff going on.
I'm sure you'll get to it, Ryan. But I did have a question of like, is because I'm looking closely at some of the work.
Yeah.
Is the as you move into the trunk itself, is that the same wire, or are you making the leaves and then attaching it later?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So if we look, do we want to maybe bring up a tree and I can kind of talk it through? You can pick whatever one you want. Yeah, perfect. That was exactly the one I was going to pick out of 600 of them.
Mind reader.
Dude, you're good at this. So the question, just to kind of rephrase it, is like, do I just make these leaves like I'm doing now, and then do I like add them on, or like how are we combining from like, leaf to trunk to whatever? This when I'm working, all of this wire will be used in that tree. So I'm starting with the top, I'm starting with the branches. It gets combined and combined as I make these branch bundles and branches into larger branches of bundles. Then it will get either combined together or wrapped around an armature or, whatever the tree shape dictates. And then it will end with the roots. And then I just trim, and you can see there in that picture, like the real little roots on the rock. That's where I actually, cut off the excess. So that wire is actually longer than those roots, as if it was going down the rock more, and I just trim it back up. So the cool thing is it starts with individual wires, and it will always be individual wires that are wrapped together. But I'm not adding necessarily, depending on the tree, I'm not adding wire. So it's contiguous. If you had a special tool, you could press, you know, a leaf on top or a branch on top, and it would kind of light up, and that wire would go all the way down the tree, which is exactly how, a tree grows. They have that kind of proportion of the size to the branches to everything else.
Great. So it's like it goes from the tip of the leaf all the way down to the root, and probably other back up through the tree and maybe to a different leaf as well.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
they won't actually go back up. It always just
Okay.
goes down one time,
Down.
except for the piece behind me, which that was a particular case with that banyan to be able to kind of create that shape and texture of all. I feel like a weatherman. All of those kind of like that's a very different kind of thicker trunk and denser canopy than like maybe the picture you have up right now. So there's a lot of like, again, that one-off situation where it's a commission, it's custom. I love that I do different things. I don't really have like inventory pieces. No two pieces could ever be the same, honestly, anyway. But yeah, it's always, most of the time, I say the same thing all the time. And I know Susanna's gonna be mad at me because we're still coiling. I still got 251 to go.
No, I'm not mad at you at all. I've done that same sort of crazy thing. So you keep going.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so it's kind of changing gears a little bit as my career has gone on, and things have kind of developed over time. From day one, super supportive parents. And again, shout out every time I do this, I say a huge shout out to my family, to my mom, my dad, to my brother, Justin, to everybody that's supported me along the way. I've had a lot of customers and a lot of support, even just, a Facebook like goes a long way, period, to anybody. And I'm super grateful for that. And I just want to say thank you, first off, to you guys again, and also anybody tuning in, because it's an honor to be able to just talk about myself. Any artist loves to talk about themselves. So I'm happy about that. But from day one, I really knew that like, hey, if this was going to go this way, and I never knew it would be this, but I need a space to do it. I need a house. My parents were very logical, logistical people. We have, we're very familiar with properties and these different things through some different jobs. And I was 18 years old, 2 o'clock in the morning, hanging out, bending metal, thinking about art, doing whatever I was doing back then. Definitely not a traditional teenager. And I was playing Minecraft. And I designed like my dream home and studio, because it's plop, plop, plop. You can build whatever you want. And again, being a weird, normal teenager, so to speak. And I'm happy to say that, 10 years later, we actually broke ground on my dream studio in real life. So something that I'm super excited about as the time has gone by is something called Splitrock Studios. And I actually have the logo of it right there on the other camera. And there we go. Perfect.
There it is.
Look at that. So I kind of had this brainchild for if I'm going to do this thing, I got to be able to have a place to do it. And, I got to be able to not burn my house down and, get everything dirty or dusty or not or whatever. So I've always kind of had this plan. And during COVID 2020, I finally purchased some land in Byfield from some artsy neighbors that I know, which was a blessing for sure. I spent COVID, wasn't allowed to be anybody, and I was just paying myself to cut down my own trees, and we milled them for the building. And we have some, experience with power tools and machinery and things like that. So being that hands-on kid, being that entrepreneur, it's really all continued to lead up to what will be. It's about a 9,000 square foot, 2-family, 6-bedroom artist residency in Byfield. And it'll be my future home and studio for my family, and, probably a roommate or two on the way, since there's no kids and plenty of bills. But 3 artists will live and rent and work on the other side of my building, since it's a 2-family. So we've designed from the ground up to be as efficient and logistical so that people have big studio spaces, concrete floors, tall ceilings right off the driveway, so you can get, work on big projects or get machinery in or work on big pieces and just kind of flow, whatever you are, whether you're a wood turner or a painter or graffiti artist or writer, or you just want to hang out and tinker and pay me. I don't really care what you do, honestly. But so that's kind of been a dream. So it's exciting that every little thing, even like something like tonight, it's all of the money and the kind of the support that I've gotten has led to this dream in Splitrock Studios. And we have the branding, we have the architect team, we have the builder team, we have the designer team. We spent all this time, we got financing and all this adult stuff. And now this year, 2024, we will be, after 10 years of dreaming and 3 years of moving dirt, we will be building my potentially forever home and studio where people could come and see my work. We could take a class, I could set it up, but also other artists will hopefully find inspiration in the woods and the nature, which so inspires me. So that's kind of my big exciting thing to share. And it's going to be even more exciting to share once we get renderings and we can start to post and kind of do all that once we get everything permitted and approved and everything. But I just want to just say and remind everybody that it's never too late to, go down a path or a career or a dream or a passion, because I was just a kid that failed English and liked to bend metal. And now, I'm teaching all these people, I'm doing all these things, and I don't think I'm any more special than anybody else, because I'm so inspired by so many other of the amazing artists in our community. And the community is what has allowed me to do what I do, and even meeting Mike and doing all that stuff. But it's also hopefully what I can give back is this special space to come and be inspired and potentially work and live there. But also there's going to be a room to photograph artwork there and just really just be hopefully an asset to the greater community outside of just my street.
That is
And where
fantastic.
again is this?
This is in Byfield, Massachusetts.
Never heard of that. Is it out in the western part?
No, it's actually on the eastern part. It's just south of Newburyport. Technically, Byfield is part of Newbury, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of people have always heard of Newburyport and areas like that. So we are just south of Newburyport, hence the Newbury and Newburyport. And I have 5 acres of a 100-acre horse farm with thousands of acres of protected woods behind us, and the property and the site. And it's going to have reclaimed stone for fireplaces and the wood that from the property that is going to be used for stair treads and furniture and things like that. It's been quite the process, and hopefully with the builder and the designer, it can really just pay homage to the space and look really beautiful and also be functional, but I just want to have a sweet house.
Yeah. And I had a question, kind of that's first of all, amazing news, Ryan. Looking
Thank you.
forward to that.
Yeah.
I wonder, because I think artists do need resources to produce bigger work, and studio space is limited. Their houses can be limited. Sometimes they're
Yeah.
working from home studios that might need to function as other things. What has your journey been like in terms of working larger, thinking about those large sculptures? How did you find the resources for it? What like allowed you to start to scale up your sculpture? Because I think it's an ambition for a lot of artists, but it's easier, to dream about it than it is to actually truly scale up your work.
Sure. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Every artist is different. I mean, as a sculptor, I feel like just like if you're a woodworker or metal workers, or even if you're like, I guess some painters have a hard time, but most people in their home studio, they can either just move some stuff and get a bigger canvas in there, or they can maybe, move some things around and maybe get another rack for some ceramics or something like that. But when you get into sculpture, you need the proper ventilation and lighting and space and height, and, things better not catch on fire. So like there's a lot of kind of logistics as a sculptor that works with a couple different mediums, especially involving metal and, construction and things like that. So the home studio, which we're in right now, has served beyond what me or my family ever thought it could or would. But as I started to actually need to cut stone, that's thousands of dollars of diamond equipment that has to be used outside. And so that way we're not, using all this wicked loud stuff and filling a home up with dust and stone dust and noise and everything. So I do a lot of things, right on the driveway or our concrete kind of apron of the driveway. But I'm lucky enough, my dad and I have a big kind of 3-door garage, and we'll pull the trucks and stuff out. So I've done a lot of welding and woodworking and some soldering and cutting and grinding out there. And then for those larger projects, actually, one of my neighbors at Splitrock Studios, Evan Jesperson, who is a sculptor, one of the 2 brothers on the property that are also artists. He is a large scale sculpture. So he had a big studio. I pay him to help me. We created the large Alnoba tree, that piece that you're showing right now. There's a bunch of pieces that we've created as the space got larger. And part of my kind of design for Splitrock Studios is a big three-car garage for me so that I can pull things out. There's a big, it's at least a 10-foot ceiling, almost a 14-foot ceiling in some places. So there's area to put a big beam, and I can have a big hoist so I can pick up big rocks and hold things for me in space. And everything will be on wheels, hopefully, so that you can always, move around based on what the project is. You can kind of set up your little workshop, but it is a big step up. If there's some artists that I know that get to the point where they need a commercial space, they need a loading dock, they need, heavy machinery and presses and brakes and tools. And, I'm not quite at that step. I don't know if I ever will be. And if not, I have so many local connections between metal workers and fabricators and other people. That's, again, my key is like, if I don't need to have it in my house and I can pay somebody else that knows way more than I do, I'm happy to pay. The client's going to pay for a better product by me having to work with a professional. But the space that I have now has dictated what I'm designing for Splitrock Studios, where I will have a separate studio of the garage to act as I use this space that we're in right now. So it'll have, more of a clean space to work on finished sculptures, to, have the wire, prep the materials, maybe have a class with a couple people, but it'll be right next door through one door, right to that larger area where I will cut wire, cut a rock, drill something, weld something, and then be able to kind of just pass in between the 2 spaces. But it was a slow burn. I mean, I definitely have ticked off my parents with late nights and loud noises and loud hammering and moving things and waking up and all of a sudden cars are out because there's a giant thing halfway across the garage. And when I weld, obviously that's a whole nother ball game than just the wire, but I'm very blessed that I've had the support and the space, and it definitely has dictated, what to do. But kind of to the point of the home studio person, there's so many artists. I'm sure there's a couple here that have a studio in their attic or their basement or their living room or their second living room or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. It all is whatever is up to you as an artist. If that's what fits in your space and your time and in your creative process, incredible. Like, God bless you, and I'm glad you could figure out a way to create that and kind of have that fit into your process. For me, I just don't want to catch my living room on fire.
And real quick, Ryan, back to process. I did have a question for you. Like
Yeah,
looking at your sculptures, it's like you know, especially with something that is pretty laborious, in terms of like time. What's your process in terms of planning? Because it's
sure.
definitely a lot of them have a specific movement to them. Like this one feels like it's blowing in the wind to the right. Do
Yep.
you do drawings? Do you let them evolve organically, or what's your process like, for example, with this one?
Yeah. So that piece actually was part of a kind of residency I did at the Governor's Academy in Byfield. So they actually purchased a piece from an artist, as well as have them have a show there and kind of talk with the students. And I'm very blessed to have a great relationship with the teachers and the staff at the Governor's Academy. I also live right down the road, which is super helpful. Um, so a piece like that, and again, I've done hundreds of these. Um, in the beginning, I wouldn't really draw because first off, I'm like a horrible drawer for someone that bends metal for a living. That's why I don't draw. So I pay other people to draw. But there is definitely like a rough proportion that I lay out. And I would say any artist, I'm sure you feel the same way, where it's like whether you do a sketch on a paper or whether you're kind of like judging, like, hey, a rock is this big, I want it to come up this high, I'll take the wire and I'll kind of do one of these where I'm like, if I bend it this way and do this, like it's kind of be a little bit of a tree or something like that. So there's a way to kind of lay things out on in space and say the rock's here and kind of do the math. But a lot of it just comes with the time that I've spent doing it. And also I leave extra wire. It's the armatures that are here and all these different things. There's a process that I've evolved over time to really allow there's allowance for the wire to do what it's going to do. And I purposely twist in certain ways that are random. And I purposely try to do things that are never the same length. And at the end of the day, nature is perfect at what it does, and I'm not perfect. So on a piece like that, I can stagger my clumps and I can stagger my twists and I can shape it and make it look random. But at the end of the day, it's not really random because I, as a human, I'm interacting with it. So I can only try to be the least patterned I can be, which gets into like a really interesting argument of like patterns actually aren't even random because it's just a pattern of randomness. But I like when I can have that freedom to say, do a windblown piece and really kind of get creative with. And I've done a lot of, some of them aren't always as dramatic. Like I've done some that are more like kind of hanging down versus all across. But for me, it's just really comes down to like, if the client or I want a certain look, it's my job as a creative problem solver, which is what all artists are. We're just creative problem solvers. How do we make this thing look like this thing, or use this material or this technique in certain ways? It's just up to us to say, here's where we want to end up. How are we going to work backwards and make this kind of process? And I kind of come at it from more logistical, kind of businessy mindset. I respect the crap out of other artists that will just like totally wing things and be experimental and be spontaneous, because it's a skill I don't have. And I collect art that I find super interesting from people like that, because there's like no way in heck I would have known how to do any of the decision making that they did or the mark making to do that. But yeah, I think from the experience and also just from kind of planning it out, starting with the end in mind and kind of working your back from there is how to try to be successful with planning things like that.
How big is
Cool.
that piece that he just had up?
That piece is, I believe, about 26 by 26, maybe 30 by 30.
Everything you've shown to at least these ones that he's brought up, very bonsai-ish.
Mhm.
I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, the wire
And now
bonsai is.
are you even breaking the rock that you get to get it in the shape like this one, or do you find them pretty and use how it came naturally of
That
the
is a
rock?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I love collecting rocks. Just ask my, truck bed and gas bill. But I do augment the rock. So I have special tools to cut the rock, flatten the rock, drill the rock, seal the rock, clean the rock. So for most pieces, and again, I do mostly commission work. So a customer will, most of the time, half the time at least, they will provide me with a rock. So the piece, this banyan piece is actually on a piece of coral, which is really cool. It's on a
Oh, really?
It's called oolite. So it's like coral that's actually from the ground because it used to be like a primordial thing and then it got washed away and then it added land and Pangea and all that fun stuff. So
Oh.
that customer shipped those from Florida to me, 3 of them. And I had to pick one that I thought was right. And then I had to cut this massive, thing in half this way and make it flat. So I do augment the bases. And for your question, the one that Mike was showing on the screen with the greenish rock base, that was from the marsh that is right near us, that is behind Governor's Academy. And it was maybe, if that's 30 inches or so, that was maybe another 4 to 6 inches lower. And I had to pick a point where kind of the apex of its mass was low because then it started to taper again. So I picked a point, kind of set it up on my jig and made my mark and cut it at the widest point because I want it to be really stable because that's a very narrow kind of tall piece because it was going to go along kind of a ledge. Whereas the banyan tree behind me, it's more wide and round because it's actually going on like a tabletop. So when I work with these clients, it's part of the way I augment the rock is where they want to put it. I can't put that piece where I put that piece because this piece wouldn't fit on that piece's ledge. So it's very custom. And that's what I like is that I like to, again, begin with the end in mind. It's like, where's this thing going? What angles is it going to be seen from? Where's the lighting? All these factors as a professional artist and to any artist, that's all perceived value. Asking those questions and caring about all those things, it makes the customer get a better experience and you can charge for that. That's a value. That's you having experience that's pertinent to your craft.
And how do you attach, like in the picture, how was the tree attached to the rock?
Oh man.
Do you have, is there a rod actually between the trunk and the rock, or how do you do that?
So we're getting into the nitty gritty here. I'm glad we're doing this in the last, the 7th inning here because now we're no. I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. No, I'm glad you're asking because I will tell you my secret. The secret to the larger pieces, and I, just for the record, make some of the largest wire trees in the world from what I've found, and I've looked up quite a lot of wire trees. There is an armature that is in the tree. So, for example, that one on the screen, the large kind of windblown one, it's not quite this shape because this is for a different shaped tree. But there's an armature that I create, whether it's soldered or welded, it's brass or steel, and I just wrapped, and these are where the branches are going to come out. So I create this armature, and then that wire gets wrapped around it. So for the tree example that he has on screen, there's an armature that starts right as that wire just gets small enough where you can see those kind of last wire clumps of the branches start. So it starts all the way at the end, traces up all the way to the top of the tree, down to the trunk, and all the way down. And that gets secured into the rock as well.
There's that. Okay. Thank you.
So that is a very top secret. Thank God nobody else will see this so that you don't give away the secret. But yes, the armature.
Promise.
Yeah, thank you. I will get that in writing after. We'll send an email.
Okay.
But yes, that to answer your question, the armature is how it's all still wire. It's all, it's not like I'm making clay or, doing some other kind of thing. And even this banyan tree, actually, instead of the armature looking like this, it actually was like, it looks like this, like it has depth. I actually welded it to make it kind of thicker and wider at the base to give that, you can see how really thick that is. It's hollow. I welded that instead of the traditionally, which is the brass rod, which is the same brass rod I use on this. I wonder where I got it. But yes, that is kind of the trick to create the shapes like he has there with the tree, is that that will dictate. And this one that I grabbed is for the Braintree back there, which is also a town in Massachusetts. But this one is for that because the tree that we're creating is going to be kind of like a bonsai tree coming out of that brain out the top. And there's also a metal base to it. So this I shape and create, and you can see it kind of undulates and kind of spirals. And I'm in control of all of that. I'm purposely doing those things to create the form and the shape and kind of the flow of natural, even though, again, it's not really natural because I have to make these decisions.
Well, it's cool. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I think we have about 10 minutes left. Is there any other particular things or questions or comments or anything at all?
I did want to clarify something because it's like I'm 95% sure I get it, but like so that the leaves are made,
Yep.
like the form. Sort of in this case, it's mostly strands, and then it wraps into the branches, like much like nature would kind of work. And then as it forms larger and larger, as more strands come together, it wraps around the armature.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that order of those things and the amount of those things and the distance between those things is how I determine every shape of tree I ever make. It's really those factors are what determine to make a tree look like that versus anything else. Thank you, Leah, so much. That was awesome. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Great.
And I actually have a new book, which just came out. It's called Deeply Rooted. And it actually shows my second book, and it shows the process of creating one of my wire trees as well as kind of more about me. And this has some awesome pictures by my photographer, Ryan Gregory, and it actually shows that process, whether it's twisting around the armature and creating the roots. You can see kind of, again, like you were saying, the kind of addition of those things, all the way down to how I make those clumps and the leaves and things like that. So if you are so inclined, definitely, check out this book. And I also bring a copy with me to all of the classes that I teach. And my next class, like I said, is at the Gathering Place Studio, which is in Somersworth, New Hampshire, on Valentine's Day, 6 to 8 p.m. And there's about 8 spots left, I think.
I see. One other question, Ryan, and of course, anybody else, please feel free to interrupt at any time. With these sculptures, I mentioned the do you draw, do you draft? The other part of it is I had a question about is, are you ever working from any kind of reference? Like, are you thinking of any specific type of species of tree or even specific trees? What do you use for photo reference or reference in general?
Yeah, that's a great kind of counterpart question. So, like for example, this banyan tree, which is just the topic of the night because it's what's in my studio. The client sent 15, 20 pictures and videos because they literally have that tree outside their house. So there's almost always, especially with a commission, I'm working from a specific tree. And the tricky and cool thing, just like if you're ever a pet portrait artist or a portrait artist or something like that, the things that make a tree or a subject matter unique, you have to include those because that's how you differentiate it between any other tree. So I've done trees that the client loved the broken dead branch. I've done trees where it grew in a weird way. I've done trees where, it's a specific tree that's a famous tree, or something like that on a property, or there was a tire swing in it, or a ladder going up. So that those things that make it unique. That's why the client wants it, is to make it special. And those are the things, those are elements that I need to incorporate in there to be successful in recreating that tree.
Awesome.
But yes, I often will do something like that. The only time I really don't do that in particular is if I'm just creating a work just to create it. But counterpart to that, I'm always taking pictures. Excuse me, I'm always taking pictures on my phone of trees if I'm out in the woods or if I am searching on the internet and a lot of nature things pop up. I'm always looking at different examples and interesting things that intrigue me, whether it's the way the roots are exposed or where maybe two trees merged together. Those are, again, those elements that I really want to kind of incorporate, because to me, it's standing out.
And are there any other questions for Ryan? Comments too?
Suggestions, feedback.
Just a big thank you. Very interesting.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for having me.
That's thank Mike.
And Ryan, you know, it's interesting how you talk about commissions, and I think it's different than I think some artists, because you know, I can only speak for myself.
Sure.
Many artists dread commissions, you know, and being told what
Yes.
to do, and feeling that it's robbing from their creative voice, or that you know, that they have to bend to the demands of the client. But it seems like a lot of your practice is around commissions.
Yeah.
Do you, how do you thrive in that environment? Because I think for some people, they'd see that as pure restriction. You know, I just want to do what I want to do when I want to do it, the type of
Sure.
species of the tree I'm interested in, and just go. So I didn't know if you had any comments on
Yeah.
that.
No, I have a couple, pretty brutally honest things. This is a business. This is my career. It's also a passion. So it is tough. And there have definitely been projects and commissions that are over budget, over time, not the way you want. But I've been lucky to just, you have to practice. Everything is practice. It's like dating. You have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to set expectations. You have to learn how to be a good person to work with. It doesn't matter that I'm the artist and they're paying me. I'm a teammate in this project, and the project is just make this thing that we all like, and hopefully they even love. And so, yeah, I've definitely chosen to take that, path. And I do know the artists like you're talking about that dread it and say, heck no, make this, do this. But the cool thing is, if someone likes it enough and you put it out there, and not every artist has to do this, for the record, like I'm particular, and I make commission work because I'd rather get paid to make something than make something and hope that it sells. It's just the way that I'm positioned right now. It's just a brutally honest, part of my career where I'm at right now. But it takes practice, and there are ways to learn and get better at setting expectations, communicating, contracts, again, just meeting of the minds and having phone call and be able to kind of talk out these details and these kind of situations so that you can have a success, because it's also a success for the customer. I can honestly say that there are ways to be a good art customer versus just an art buyer, to be an art supporter versus just an art buyer. There are ways to communicate with small business owners. And, if you are on Instagram or Facebook, you're an artist, you will see memes of these things, because there are plenty of people that are not good communicators with small artists and with businesses, or with small businesses. But at the end of the day, every single person that reaches out most likely is a real person. There's some that are not, but you are talking to a person, and the whole point about art, and it can be a closing statement if we need it to be, but we are so lucky to be in a world, in a community where someone finds joy in creating something and someone else finds joy in wanting that thing, whether they want it for their house, they want it for to remind them of something or look beautiful somewhere, or it fits their taste. Like, that's a beautiful thing. So what we have to remember is that the customer and the artist are both human beings. They're both people that, want to not only have the thing, but also want to hopefully make the thing. And it's finding that common ground of the middle between the want to have something and the need to create it, where that commission kind of lies. And it only gets better with more experience. It only gets better when you take yourself as seriously as you would expect anybody else to take you, and treat yourself how you would want to be treated, which is, we hear that all the time when we're kids and we forget it when we're adults. I don't know why, but I've chosen the path of doing that. And I'll tell you, I've had a bunch of really cool commissions. So I'm really not going to complain or kind of, deviate my path now. But I do have a little goal to hopefully have some more projects, and whether it's collaborations with local artists or my girlfriend or anybody else, to create some different kind of pieces that maybe aren't commissioned, but they are for the art of it, and maybe hopefully does want to buy it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. That's definitely an inspiring way to leave this conversation and demo. And I wanted to thank you so much for being a part of it. And I wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. Do you have any final inspiration words for everybody to send them off for the day?
Oh man, that was a high note. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to AVA ArtReach and to Mike for doing this and hosting, and thank you for everybody for tuning in. And yeah, just breathe and smile, and life is full of only good things.
Wonderful. Love it, Ryan. Well, thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you
And
very
hope
much.
everybody has a good week, and hope you're able to tune in next week. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was great.